well. All right, thank you so much for coming. And as you take your seats, let me start by introducing how our guest for this evening, and by mentioning how unbelievably lucky we are that we have with us today Erhard Busek. I'm not going to give a start with your title because there's a bunch of titles that we have to use here to go through the wonderful career that you have had at all levels of government. Erhard Busek was the Minister of Research and Science of Austria, the Minister of Education. He was the Vice Chancellor of Austria, also in a very interesting period of time. I mean, all periods are interesting, but you were at an important point for the history of Austria, in the history of Austria and European integration, and we're going to discuss about that a bit. And my favorite, and something that I've always prouded myself to know more than knowing the Vice Chancellor of Austria, is the Deputy Mayor of Vienna. So that is quite an extraordinary achievement that we're going to also discuss about. And on top of all of this, you're also the head of Conservative Party of Austria. But as I like to say, you are the most liberal of the conservatives in Austria, which is why we are excellent friends. And I'm honored to say that. And Mr. Busek is here with us today because we have some important issues to discuss, which is the future of Europe. Little things. We talk about little things at size. And one of them is the future of Europe. We are in the business of telling the future, or at least approximating a bit the future, and Europe is constantly on our minds. And also, as you may be familiar, there's a tiny situation with the government of Austria that it's been going on for the last weeks. We're going to touch upon that as well. And not least, we are going to discuss how it is like to have such a stellar career in both national and local politics, but also as an academic, as a think tanker, and just an all-around awesome person. So we're gonna start with, clearly I'm a fan, so that's a disclaimer there to start with. And we're gonna start with our conversation about Europe, because I think that you are one of the most important allies of putting Europe ahead of national interest in many ways, and ahead of national politics. So perhaps you can give us a few thoughts about the future of Europe from your perspective as a person who has been a part of European integration and European enlargement, particularly to the East.
Dear Professor, dear Veronica, ladies and gentlemen, I'm really quite happy to be here and to be with you. I think I'm starting my comment on Europe by saying a little bit more about my life. I was in the government as the European Union and as Austria entered the European Union. I think we did a voting about and we reached 2/3. In the beginning of the voting campaign, it was to expect that we might lose the vote. I think it was an extreme efficient campaign where we can convince the Austrians. I'm making a side remark. The Austrians are still convinced. We are doing still some research, how the people are thinking. It is still around 60 to 65% in favor. But if you are going to Austria, I warn you, every Austrian criticizing the European Union. I think that's quite clear. It's in the mentality of my beloved country. I was part of the government at this time and leading the campaign of the one side. It was a so-called great coalition in the political language of my country between the Social Democrats. They had a chancellor in this time and I was vice chancellor in this government. But they were quite close and I think that might play a role later on different questions concerning the Austrian situation. I think I want to add, because being in Johns Hopkins, I think it's really a necessity. I think then, by some relations, I knew an important man in the State Department of the United States after I left the government, and he was asking me if I want to come in the Southeast European Cooperative Initiative. Horrible enough, I think we are saying SECI. This is an initiative which was invented by the State Department and by Ambassador Richard Schiffter. The nice story about Richard Schiffter is he was a born Austrian Jew. He had to leave in 1938, but he was the only one of his family who was able to leave. Other 28 members of the family went to Auschwitz and therefore to death. A horrible story, and I'm extremely grateful to my friend Richard that he did not blame my country where these things had happened in the direction of Nazi and so on and so on. We know, we learned each other, I think, because I did a visit in Washington, and I met dinner at the embassy and so on. Then we came later in contact, and I was telling him what I was doing. I was always a fan of Southeast Europe, or if you want to say Balkans, because I was really convinced that not only my home country had closer relations to there, but that it is also very important for Europe. And this Southeast European Cooperative Initiative was an instrument of the Americans, I think, to be the broken parts of former Yugoslavia again nearer to each other. I think that was a very important instrument. I was the high representative on this subject. This SECI is still existing. It's a part of the OESC, Organization of Europe Security and Cooperation here. And we are trying still to bridge the situation. Here I will do a statement in another direction afterwards. I think from then, this initiative was copied by the European Union. And they said, okay, we have to do it. And it's coming out of a conviction of the European Union. What are the Americans doing in the Balkans? It's a part of Europe, and it's our job. I want to fair, not why I'm at Johns Hopkins. I'm saying this because it is true. The Americans until now did even more as the Europeans, having a better feeling what to do and having stronger engagement. I think the key figures in these countries are the US ambassadors still. They have a very strong influence. Sometimes you can discuss is this influence good or not, but the European Union was not really able to develop here the right strategy and the right engagement, putting a lot of money in the Balkans. I think they are the biggest payer on this subject, but sometimes not very skilled to use the money. But this is another question. I became this year, and then the European Union decided to create a copy, the so-called Stability Pact for Southeast Europe. And then I was, after intermediate time of another German politician, I was in charge for 7 years of this Stability Pact. And then I did dissolve it and was saying the countries of the region have to do it for themselves, which is a limited success story until now. This instrument is existing, the Council for Southeast Europe, here based in Sarajevo, but it's not really moving forward so far, with all the difficulties about which we have to talk later. I finished it saying that the countries for themselves have a responsibility for sure, which they are doing partly they are not successful. It's a very mixed situation here, I have to say. I was in charge of, and I'm continuing with an institute, the job in this direction, and I created a lot of cooperation. For example, the European Union strategy for the Danube region. I think the Danube is a beautiful river because there's famous Danube boats existing and so on and so on. And it is a mythology in my country. But in reality, it is a very interesting river. Along this river, it's only the second largest in Europe, are 14 countries, 14 countries. And here you can imagine that this presentation of different culture, different economic situation, different, and so on is creating a lot of problems. And I'm also involved in this. And in a lot of lists of think tanks, activities on other institutions and so on. Forget it. I'm still employed. So here I'm stopping and starting with the real theme, which I had here. What is a success story of Europe and what is a failure of Europe? First of all, it's a success story. I think Europe managed it to overcome the situation after 2 world wars. I think both world wars, also the first, had a deep influence on the European situation. And I think what happened after the First World War did not give the hope that after the Second World War they will come together. Here I have to praise the Americans. The Americans put pressure on the European countries by one instrument which is nearly forgotten, Marshall Plan. The Marshall Plan was the system of economic cooperation, but the American State Department was so clever. I think economic cooperation does only work if we have a political cooperation. And this was the basis for developing the European integration process. And may I say, if you're asking me of a success story of Europe, this is the European Union until now or some years before, because it developed a common feeling and a common situation, not on all fields, but mainly. And beside the Brexit, the leaving of the United Kingdom, I think it is sticking together. You can read in the newspaper always that the Polish will leave, that the Netherlands will leave, that the Hungarians will leave, and so on and so on. Nobody wants to leave. Only the British did it with another historical background. You have to know the British are still very much convinced the Commonwealth is still existing. Great Britannia rules the waves, which is a very famous sentence. And so far, I think they have an alternative. They are suffering in the moment because they are missing truck drivers, which you can read and so on and so on. But this is another question. We will discuss it afterwards. The rest is a success story. By all the reports about criticism, what is not really functioning and so on and so on. But I think it has to improve and we are coming to closer. As an Austrian, I'm here in Italy. I think we had difficulties with the Italians before the First World War, after the First World War, before the Second World War. After the Second World War, a pressure was created by Europe that we have to come together. We had one problem which was very important, Südtirol, the German language, South Tyrol in English, Alto Adige in Italian. And I think under the pressure of coming together in the European Union, the problems were settled. I think we have extremely close feelings and really no problems here with the Italians, which I think is an extremely good development. And I can tell a lot of other stories where the situation has improved. Full stop. Where are we failing? Not did. Where are we failing, especially nowadays? I think first of all, I have to say a common feeling. The drive of European integration is not anymore really existing. There's a certain feeling in the 27 member states of the European Union, okay, the European Union is big enough. Very often, the Europeans in the European Union are mixing up the European Union with Europe. I think you have a feeling in the EU member states, we are Europe. And what is left? Okay, that's their mistake, which is for sure not true, because the entering of the European Union is a difficult job. You have to ask the Balkan countries, the six one which are waiting. It's not really proceeding, but this is a later subject. First point. The second point, what we really not understanding, and hopefully I'm able to express it, because English is not my home language. I think the Europeans are not understanding that the importance of Europe is going down. We all grew up in European countries with the history teaching about the importance of Europe, and we are dominating Europe out of different directions because France, the United Kingdom, the German Empire, the old German Empire, and so on and so on, and everything is based in the Imperium Romanum, and so on and so on. I think that had for a very long time importance. The way that a lot of things were invented by the Europeans is true for a very long time. Nowadays, I think what is invented in the United States or elsewhere, Japan or wherever, is even more important. That we are losing step by step importance, I think is coming up, because I think we are shrinking the power we have, but in reality, I think the continent is not the biggest one. Here are some other continents being really bigger and coming up step by step. For example, China, it's not a continent, but I think sometimes they have this behavior, and so on and so on. And Africa is growing also, getting more importance, nearly forgotten because the Europeans by colonialism dominated for a very long time. And left a long list of problems. This I have to confess here, and so on and so on. I think this we are not getting. What might be the positive side is the Europeans are getting this. They have still some capacity of brain in science and research. And if you are developing for the economy, for techniques, and so on and so on, I think then they might keep a certain kind of importance here, if they are doing so. It's depending on one thing, European cooperation. Still, it is partly separated between the nations, and we have still a kind of competition. We British are better than, and so on and so on. And also we Austrians are always saying, we are here better than the others. Every one of the Europeans want to be better than the other Europeans. They can only be better if they are cooperating. And this is a subject which they are learning step by step and comparatively very slowly. I think you can see it in the European Union. If there is a meeting of the European Union, always one of the prime ministers is running out and announcing to the press, I made a proposal and we were the most important with this proposal and we pushed it through, and so on and so on. I think they shall learn they have to cooperate and decide it here really together. I think Jean-Claude Juncker, who was a very clever guy, he was saying, I'm never going out after a meeting of the European Union saying Luxembourg was the strongest in the meeting because we are a tiny country. You can't explain it here to the public. That's one of the problems, I think, for the Europeans. That's the problems on the surface. I think we have deeper inner problems. I don't want to go to different subjects like economy, social affairs, and so on and so on, because then I'm doing a long list of differentiation here. I think what we have to learn to create our capacity, to create our sources, to create our experience as a contribution to Europe. For the moment, we are offering it as a differentiation to the others. I think that's one of the huge problems for sure existing. I think to tell everybody here in which way we Austrians and so indifferent to the others contributed here to be very special. And I think this to explain they are investing a lot of money in campaigning and PR and information and so on and so on. And coming to the next step, I think this tendency is growing. I think what we were not able to develop is a real common European democracy. We have democracies in different quality, I think, but not a real European democracy. If you ask what makes Europe, I think the official announcement of every politician of a European government is human rights. But if you look, the quality of the human rights are very much differentiated in the country. My beloved country has also some problems where we are in human rights not so good as we should be. And we are blamed by the Court of Human Rights also on this subject, I think, to be serious. I think this internal discussion under the Europeans about our own quality is not even existing. Then you have also, I'm always saying common things. I think there's always a discussion, and you will find it in the media, also in literature, about the European narrative. The real European narrative is not yet existing. It is only always said the human rights are the European narrative. That's not enough. I think we have a lot of difficulties out of the heritage of a sometimes too rich history with differentiation, defining us out of this history. And we are always celebrating history, or histories, I may say. I think here is every country quite good. My beloved French friends are always, it's always the French Revolution. With the French Revolution, we have everything invented. The Germans are more soft because the Second World War is still a heritage, which is a heavy heritage for sure, still for them. But also they are saying we have the Grundgesetz, which is it's a constitution after 1945. It's done in 48 or 49. It's a very progressive instrument for democracy. Where I say, my fear is, and we are looking for a government in Germany, that they are coming closer to a lot of difficulties concerning their own democracy, what is existing for. The Germans have to learn to build up a government out of three parties, which has never happened. Also not in Austria, but this is another question. It's not so important because we are a small country. I think the Germans will lose importance in the next time. That's the reason why they are celebrating Angela Merkel. Angela Merkel is celebrating herself because she's traveling now through whole Europe and saying many thanks, thanks to you, and. But I think it will not continue in this way, which I think might be very difficult because don't underestimate the Germans are proud. And I think they are asking for being very well received by all the difficulties which they had in the past. And then you have the complicated history of other countries. I'm a fan of the countries coming out of the old monarchy. I think the differentiation between my Hungarian friends, between my Slovak friends, between my Polish friends, between all countries around is really great. And if you are going to the Balkans, with which I started, the differentiation here is also big. But they have been together as Yugoslavia for more than 70 years. This what not even me, somebody who knows the former Yugoslav countries, is not really understanding. I think if you are going in one of the countries of former Yugoslavia, they are telling you before the differences, not what is in common. Because I think besides the Albanian and the Macedonian language, I think all the languages are coming out of the same roots. Slavic languages. No, there are differentiations. My beloved Montenegrinian friends, a tiny country with 600,000 inhabitants, invented their own language with an additional capital. They created an own capital to be in differentiation. In reality, it's a Serbian dialect which they are speaking. I think I can continue endless, which is not the sense here. But I think that's the difficulties of Europe. I want to say on the positive side, by all this background of this rich history, you know, the famous sentence of Winston Churchill, the Balkans have more history as they can consume. That's a very clever sentence, but I think that's true for all Europe. We have too much history as we can consume in general. And that's one of the big problems existing. That has one consequences. The Europeans have a tendency always looking first at all and second and third to themselves. I think not to the others. I think we are on the way to learn. This is the great importance of global development. The Europeans have not yet learned the global development. And then I can, if you raise the right questions, tell you what are the difficulties concerning Russia, concerning Turkey, concerning the Balkans in general, what are the next steps for more Europe. But with this, I want to stop first of all.
So one thing that we've always talked about is the difficulties or the downside of looking at Europe as a sequence of crises, because that just is not only not real, but it's also counterproductive to constantly look at Europe and identify it as a processing crisis. But at the same time, you also identify now several crises on a multi-level, in a multi-level setting. So there is a crisis at the national level of people who are not willing to cooperate. There is a crisis among the institutions of the European Union that apparently are not building a narrative that is conducive to progress and to solidarity. There is a crisis of values because we are not doing right when it comes to human rights, and that is something that's quite important. And there is a crisis of self-perception when we're thinking of Europe's role in the world and that it should have a role, but at the same time it has to fight against the idea that its role is diminishing, but it should have a specific role. So I guess my question is, how would you build that narrative if tomorrow you are offered the position of, I don't know, which one do you want? European Commissioner or the leader of the European Party, or maybe Chancellor of Germany, and be able to redress the situation coming from a member state? How would you rebuild that narrative? Where would you start?
A clear question. I would refuse to be the president of the Commission or another job on the European level. What I would do, I would catch all the governments of the member states of the European Union, put them together like the Vatican is doing if voting for a pope, put them together and say, you have to come out with the European narrative. And I think before, you cannot leave this room. That's a real problem. I think the governments in their election campaigns and sometimes also the administration are living out of this differentiation. I think as long as they are looking what is different on my side from the others, they won't come together. I think that's a real problem. We have differentiations about the current situation. I think they are coming together by business and by the economy. I think that's growing. Extremely helpful was COVID-19. I think they are cooperating in research on this subject. They are cooperating even taking ill people from one country to the other because they have empty beds and the others are full until the top, and so on and so on. I think this common feeling of Europe is only working if there are needs, if somebody has difficulties. I think here it is in a certain way working. What I'm admiring, for example, there are always some events or horrible happenings or disasters and so on and so on. I think the disaster cooperation, for example, is working. But I think as a former politician, I may tell you, you cannot make politics out of disasters. Huh? I think by this imagination, by me, I would say we have to create disasters where we have more difficulties and so on and so on. I think the second step to answer the question seriously is, I think we have to create more common discussions, which are not really for sure existing. What do I mean with common discussions? I was creating an activity first in the Balkans, and before we tried it also in Europe, to create a common understanding of history. I think here I was more successful in the Balkans. We created a common history book, which is extremely good. How did we do? I think we did it since the time of the end of the French wars through Napoleon here, as nationalism was created. We asked a lot of historians to write articles about the same time, not about different times, about the same time. And this is extremely, there are 6 volumes. It's extremely informative, because here you can read the different perception of history, which for sure is existing. I think here you can read what's nonsense is spread over by the historians in my country, and the other nonsense of the other countries, and so on and so on. I think here it happened as is always happening. The European Union financed the process, also some privates. The European Union stopped the money, and now at the moment it's not working. But I'm still very much engaged here. I think we have to look to education. That's a real answer I want to give. That's step by step becoming better. I think by all the political systems, by organization of the universities, it is coming to closer, and so on and so on. Getting a common system here in the universities, but for sure it has to be broader by exchange. We have also a lot of exchange activities for youngsters, a Eurorail ticket, and so on, which you might say that's very primitive, okay, but I think if it is existing, if it is used by youngsters, it has a great importance. We are doing it at the university system. Jean Monnet program, I think, is a great contribution. I'm Jean Monnet professor too at an Austrian university, and I'm always moving to other universities by Jean Monnet. That's helpful, because in all my deep respect for universities, but sometimes a lot of university professors are responsible for differentiation and not for cooperation. That's within the nature. My university is better than the other, and that I think you can imagine what I mean. And there's also a kind of university nationalism existing for sure, in all my deep respect, because, and this I'm teaching all the universities where I'm always going, so you have to suffer also under the same what I'm saying. The university is a European invention, not of one of the countries. I think it was invented in the Roman Empire in a certain way here, and they had a common language, Latin, a common curriculum, and also a career. If you are looking to famous scientists of former times, they were moving to Europe, really impressive, going from one country to the other. For example, Erasmus of Rotterdam. I think he was changing the universities, I think, like I'm changing a shirt from one place to the other. And that's extremely good. And we are starting a little bit to have this exchange. I think it could be for sure more, but it's the right direction, and we are learning here on this subject. I think that's also a direction which is necessary. We have to develop a common education. One thing is helpful, technology, because the technology, there is no nationalist technology. Sometimes by my beloved Russian friends, because they are telling us that only Russia can invent this or that. You can see it by the vaccination Sputnik or something like that. That's a kind of nationalism, but they are suffering by this because Sputnik is not accepted in other countries, and they are not quite sure that it is following really international standards. But hopefully they are able to improve it. And don't blame them for it. I think it was very responsible to develop an own vaccination research, which for sure they did. It's not a success story, which you can read by the figures nowadays, but here you can see the importance of this creating more cooperation. I think the exchange of the universities and is extremely important. By education, I think we have to do a little bit more. It started also concerning the vocational training. The vocational training has also been this way. I think the British are now suffering by the vocational training of truck drivers because they have none. And it was done by those who are coming from Romania, Hungary, and so on and so on. That's the next step. I think by migration, we are learning that we are depending on each other. We are learning also the contrary, to have hatred to those who are coming from outside. That's one of the key questions. Here, the Commission is extremely weak on this subject. It's not really going forward. I think they are always making big announcements and nice statements, but they are not really improving in this situation. I think it's also depending on legislation. I think we have to move in the direction of getting more united legislation in Europe, because I have to say, in reality, we need a global legislation on a lot of subjects, which is not developing. I think best greetings, if you know some professors of juridical faculties, they shall do more in this direction, which they are not doing here. Here I'm extremely critical. Oh yes, we have international law, we have international private law, and so on and so on. But that's not enough. That's only a part. Don't forget that the law in main countries beside the Anglo-Saxon room was developed on the basis of Latin law. By starting, we had a lot in common. I think we have these two systems, and I think it is really able, we are really able to move it more stronger forward under global auspices. The difficulty, I may say, I warn you, our Chinese friends have a great empire tradition. And if they are going back, they are looking to their own law regulations, which have a feeling that they should be for the whole world. I think that's one of the underestimation we are doing by the Chinese. I think the Chinese have the feeling China is the world, not they are in the world, or they may influence the world, is the world. Like Europe thinks.
Europe is the world, and US thinks US is the world.
But the Chinese have it even in the symbol for the word China. If you know this symbol, it is four edges symbol, Rechteck.
Oh, yeah,
angle, and one stroke through. That's China, in the middle of the world. I think that's a symbol for China. Don't underestimate this. They have a straight thinking in this direction to explain everything out of this. And they have a strong belonging to their own history, and they are explaining everything out of the Chinese history. I think they have a sort of Marxism, but stronger is Chinese history and Chinese thinking and so on in this context. I think here you can see some developments for sure which existing on which we should concentrate. We are more in common in Europe in a lot of things like infrastructure and so on and so on. I'm really involved in development of the railway system in Europe. It's a difficult job, I may say. I think because every country developed the railway system, for example, after their own, and now we have to internationalize it, which for sure is not an easy job, because you have to know if a train is coming. If the train is changing the border, then they are changing the driver and the regulations and so on and so on, which is idiotic. I think maybe that the ecological discussion is pushing us forward. I think the ecological discussion can have a certain tendency of stronger unification if it is done right. For the moment we are in competition and saying we are doing more than the others and so on and so on, we are blaming them. And if somebody is blaming us, they are not understanding us and so on and so on. That's for sure a little bit of an overview. Beg your pardon, I'm talking too much.
Well, I'll use this moment to actually push you a bit further on this conversation about values. There is a generational change in everything that you've mentioned as well, because of all the mixing of nations and the interests and our further understanding that there were universities outside of Europe as well, perhaps even before universities of Europe. There are some conversations going in that the direction. So there are some generational changes, and I was just thinking, what do you think about the younger generation today, from your perspective, when it comes to the values that they are upholding? Because many of the things that you are talking about, and also the idea of a global citizen, and the idea of these rules that do not know any borders, are not necessarily as upheld as we would like them to have been by this time. And I'm wondering, what do you think in comparison about the younger people that you deal with? Not that you are not young yourself, but there is a certain perspective that you can have that we would benefit to know more about. And I'm also thinking that Austria is not particularly in the avant-garde of promoting inclusive values right now either.
Which we have never been. I think my beloved country, or the population of Austria, is always in the direction of a tendency to arrange ourselves with everything what is existing. I think the question of distinction is not our case. Here I have to be self-critical, for sure. I think there are some philosophers in Austria with a kind of criticism, for sure, but they were not the most influential. I think we had other directions like Wittgenstein, Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus, and so on and so on. But about values, beg your pardon, I think I love this question because it's extremely important, and I think we have a lot of difficulties on this. I'm giving a self-description. I think by my orientation, I grew up within the Catholic Church, not in the sense that I'm somebody who wants to be a monk or similar things. I'm not in the sense a believer, very much limited, and so on and so on. But I'm really convinced that the Ten Commandments had influence the world in the right way, and on this basis, I think values have to be developed. First point. Second point, these convictions are going down. I think the influence of the Christian churches in Europe, I think, is really going down. Not only the number of members and the mistakes which they did, misuse of children but in general. I think the voice of the church is sometimes heard by Pope Francis, for example. Everybody is saying, it's great what you said, but I don't want to ask my beloved Christians if they are really believers. The number of non-believers, for example, in my country, I know. I think in this direction, But I may say, as far meeting the young generation constantly, I may say there is a desire of orientation existing, which is not looking for churches or institutions, but I think there's a feeling there must be something on which I can do some orientation for me. I think that's a mistake of my beloved Catholic Church because they are not offering solutions. But in general, I think we have only the discussion, where are the values and which one, and so on, but no real answers existing. That's for sure. We have a general situation that institutions which gave a little bit of orientation are in reality going down and not going up. You have on the one side the desire for values and the orientation, and on the other side the offer is going here down, which is a horrible situation. It's extremely important. I'm looking forward, what will it create? That's an extreme danger, I may say. I'm not an historian, but I like history, and I was looking what we have invented. This situation might create a difficult situation also for the democracy. If somebody is coming up and offering a kind of solution, like some radicalism did it, Marxism, the Nazis in a silly way, and so on and so on, I think that might be a temptation. It's not yet happening as far as I can see. I can only look to Austria, Germany, and to some other neighboring countries here in the center of Europe. It's not yet happening, but I think this way to authoritarianism in politics is going a little bit in this direction. It's extremely dangerous here for sure existing, because we have no critical discussion really. I think what we need is a stronger tendency of critiques, not only in the sense of philosophy, that's always nice, but I think in a real behavior in discussing political problems, some offers which are existing, and so on and so on. Because I think if you look a little bit around, politicians pronouncing a lot of fake news and so on have some success. I don't underestimate this. That's a difficult situation which we are coming closer. That's one of the things which I'm really fighting and running around and finger pointing of this because the consequences might be horrible. Even hopefully you are not killing me or asking me to leave the room. I think that's also the temptation of the ecologists. I think they have also, some way of thinking. We have the only solution, and it has to be done. No discussion, please. Nobody knows that all the proposals existing do really work. I think, for example, concerning energy, I'm extremely skeptical. I'm not in favor of atomic energy. I was fighting against but we have not a real solution for this. And we might get a kind of dictatorship on this. And it is really moving off from ecology to the famous word cancel culture. That we have now a tendency that something for what is asked is said, it is only right and we are only allowed to do this. I think in the German language is, for example, the use of female and male versions. Here we have a kind of cancel culture in the universities. I think
I'm going to intervene here and cancel the conversation about cancel culture and rather ask you about something else related to the position that you've had in different levels of government. What was the position that you always wanted and you never got? And what was the position that you refused to have because you didn't want to compromise?
I think you might wonder I was happy about every position I had to do, as far as I was convinced that I can do something, that I can move something. And then I was satisfied if I had some success to move a little bit in this direction or here in the other direction. I think my understanding of responsibility going in politics is, I think, to do something, to move something, and to take the responsibility for and discussing it. So far, I think I had a lot of jobs, not the only one she mentioned, and I mentioned. It's a long list, and I'm engaged on different things. We have the feeling, I think, to move the things forward. I think to take some responsibility for some subjects which are worthwhile to do and which are challenging me. That's my conviction on this field so far. That's the reason why I learned also to compromise, because I was always happy if I'm able to move the things forward. If not 100%, I think if it is for the first step 30%, it's quite okay. Huh? Because with the 30%, which I have, I can move it forward to the next percent, and so on and so on. And also, I have to confess, by political solutions, I don't believe that 100% solutions are really perfect. I think there's always a danger if something is 100%, it is excluding other things here. Be careful concerning 100%. That's, I think, sometimes the wrong discussion.
I want to open the floor for questions. And as you consider your questions, I'm also going to ask you if you advised the resigning Prime Minister of Austria, Kurz, to also compromise and try to make a comeback from his early loss of power.
Yeah, first I want to ask this because it's quite important. I think my discussion with Sebastian Kurz, and my problem with him, I may say, and I had it from the beginning, and I was also saying in the public, and I was heavily criticized because for some time he was a real success story. And I think he changed a lot. He brought my party back, the Prime Minister, and I think in elections he had some success. And also on some fields of politics, he was even able to move the system, because by the Great Coalition, which I've already mentioned, I think it was a system which was extremely exhausted for changes and so on and so on. I think he brought some movement in this direction. That's a positive side. The negative side, where I'm very much critical, as I met him for the first time, he became Secretary of State in the government. I was asking him, my dear friend, what do you want to reach? What is your conviction? I think what should be done. And nowadays, I'm even praising him for his reaction. He did not answer my question. I raised it 4 times. He did not answer. I think I'm happy about, because he didn't try to lie, to tell me nice stories and so on, where I might have been convinced. As he was in another critical situation as a coalition government with the Freedom Party was finished, his predecessors, I'm the predecessor, the chairman of the party, collected, and we were discussing it. And here I was also asking him something. Again, what is the content of your policy? Because I had one suspicion. I think it is only power. Power is okay. If you meet a politician saying he does not want power, then kick him out, because a politician has to ask for power. That's a real content of this. Huh? And I think, what do you want to do? He learned something concerning me. He told me the nice story. I think if it is Christmas, then he's going in the village from where his grandmother is. The person which influenced him a little bit, I learned afterwards. And then we are going to the Holy Mass service in the night of the 24th of December, birth of Jesus Christ. I think he's a clever guy. He knows my Christian roots, and therefore he was giving this answer. But I think in this sense, beside having power, that's my criticism. He has no imagination what to do in politics. I think he's administering politics in a very good way. I think giving answers and so on and so on. He is glatt. What is it in English? If somebody's you cannot hold him. Slippery is very good. Yeah. And I think that's for me the problem with him. And now I'm getting the message from his audience or from the citizens that they have also the feeling he is too glatt. He's really able in the discussions to give a nice answer, friendly. He's nobody offending, harming, and so on and so on, but it is everything.
I wonder what other politicians you have that opinion of in Europe. I know you are a fan of Chancellor Merkel. So
No,
he's not. That was irony, guys. Okay.
not at all. I think one of the difficulties the Germans now have is also urged by Angela Merkel. I think she was adapting to some things too quick.
Should we continue that or change the question? Let's get some questions, and if you want to add anything to that remark related to no, okay. Connor here, and then you state your name.
I'm Connor. I'm from Connecticut. I was actually going to ask you to elaborate on what you just said about the Chancellor.
So that was one.
I think I didn't get it.
He would like you to elaborate on your opinion of Chancellor Merkel's extraordinary career in politics.
Thank you so much for being here. My question is, you talked about how European power or European influence is eroding, and then you also talked about how there's a lot of inter-European competition instead of cooperation. So can you talk a little bit more about, sorry, this is hard in a mask, how that cooperation between European states impacts the European Union's ability to make and implement foreign policy, and furthermore, how that impacts its ability to project its power globally. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I should also add that we have plenty of attendees online who can write their questions in the Q&A chat. Okay, should we get another one? Yes. Yeah.
My name is Amina. I'm from Austria, and my question is, what is the future for the ÖVP? Will they continue with Kurz as a shadow chancellor? Will that ensure their success, or will they have to change their tactics? And if they change their tactics, you recently said you doubt it would be from Kurz's inner circle. Do you see them losing power in the future? And if so, who else would fill their place?
Thank you, Amina. That's not fair. That is the subject of your brief. You are collecting information right now. Okay, one more, and then we're gonna answer. There was Sam before, and then.
Thank you so much for coming. So my question is, you spoke a lot about the problems of kind of cultural and historical differentiation between the member states in the EU. But as I understand it, you're also a proponent of the enlargement process and continuing to expand the union. Do you believe that those two ideas are in conflict at all? Could adding more member states to the union kind of affect or deepen that cultural, historical differentiation? Thanks so much.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. The first question is concerning Merkel, and I want to continue. I think first of all, that's a real positive side of Angela Merkel. I think coming from Eastern Germany, I think that she's Chancellor had a great importance. That was teaching the Western Germans who had a certain arrogance towards the Eastern one, that they're also somebody who is able to do politics. And I think she was able to stay for a very long time. And for this, I'm admiring her because it's not easy. I think he was, that's my feminist comment. She kicked out all men in competition with her. I think this I admired also. I think it was quite a job. Maybe will the consequence be that we are getting more normal changes between the sexes in politics, or that for a long time no women will come up in Germany? That will be an interesting question. You will see it in the past. Merkel also was able to overcome a lot of crises. I think in a certain talent, which is also the problem. That's the part of the problem I see also. She was shifting to different sides. This criticism that the CDU is merely a social democrat party is in a certain way right. I want to be fair. To go in this direction on a more, if you want, leftist or social democrat side and so on, was also in the time. I think it's based in our general development. But she was sometimes too soft. And the real problem is that on this way, the CDU lost a little bit their own line. I think the famous sentence of Franz Josef Strauss, you know who it was, a great Bavarian leader and a very Bavarian one, and a Bavarian one. I think he had always a sentence, right of my party, there's nothing. He was covering everything what is in the rightest direction and so on and so on. I think that's not anymore possible, but I think he should have done more, I think, to avoid AfD, this party, which is also a problem of orientation within Germany. I think it was not possible to create a process of a normal discussion here with this. The third point I may say concerning Merkel, this is a European one. She's still convinced that the axis between Paris and Berlin is doing the job in the European Union. This was totally right before enlargement. After enlargement, it is wrong, because Europe is a little bit bigger as this East-West combination, as the combination of former times. Because of this feeling concerning Paris and Bonn, and afterwards Berlin, is coming out of the situation of the past, maybe of the First World War, even out of the wars before. And I think even coming from the East, she did not see it. I think she had close relations to, but I think if you look, Germany and Macron, or the Macron of France, is not only here in the European Union. That's one of the problems. I think my beloved Polish friends, for example, are really convinced. I think that the Polish should have the same importance like the French and the German. It's a little bit too much, but it has some importance. They try to create the so-called Weimar Triangle here, France, Germany, and Poland. This is creating sometimes the strange reactions of the Polish, because you have to know that the Polish, it's a pity enough, have a kind of a minority complex, because they are the only country in Europe who were divided 3 times. I think there was always a solution between the Germans and the Russians. sometimes between the Germans, the Russians, and the Austrians, to divide this country. I think, don't forget, in the national anthem, the first sentence of the Polish anthem is, not yet is Poland lost. We have no national anthem where such negative connotation is existing. But that's their historical experience. And the difficulties with the Polish are coming out of the situation. They have always a feeling to be in a certain way divided.
I don't want to intervene here, but among Eastern Europeans, the Romanians start their anthem with "Romanians, wake up from your slumber of death." So I don't know. When it comes to doom and gloom, I think we have the market cornered.
My dear, the Romanian history of some other influences, you have been a part of the Ottoman Empire. That's another thing.
Yes.
But I love that you are so nationalist.
Oh, yes, absolutely. When it comes to the worst parts, I always embrace them.
First question done. I think the way of cooperation. I think this is one of the most difficult learning processes within the European Union. I think it is only working as there is a crisis. The financial management, I think this discussion how to do it was started by the Greek crisis, and now it came up to the banking crisis and so on, and there we are coming closer. It needs a lot of time. You can say it's always too long. I think learning processes in politics are always lasting longer. I think you can go here to the university and have a seminar, and then you learn something within half a year. Politics, I think, lasts longer. I think that's a very difficult process. And it has to go into depth that is overtaken. I know it from my own country. I think we need to learn a lot out of history, and partly we did it. So far, it is developed. It's the easiest on the economic affairs. I think it is extremely difficult in administration, for example, because the tradition of administration in every country is totally different. I think even my small country has an old tradition of administration out of the Habsburg monarchy, and their behavior is in this way. I think there's still a certain feeling for an authoritarian way, and we are taking even words out of history. I think we have a job within the administration with a beautiful name, Hofrat. To translate it, it is Counselor of the Court. We have no court anymore, but we have still a Hofrat. I think they are explaining it now in another way, but they have sometimes the feeling it's going down because the knowledge about the monarchy is only existing by Empress Sissi and such nice stories and not more. So far it's ended, but we are also a smaller country where it's not existing. I think the next question is concerning the People's Party, my party, and the future. You described it rightly. I think Mr. Kurz was not working with the party. He had an inner circle. I think the description of the inner circle in the last weeks was bunker. I think that means for wars, if you build up fortification, if you are sitting in, Hitler was sitting in a bunker in Berlin. And Kurz was also sitting here in a bunker. I think the People's Party would have a good future if the party is using the chance which is existing. I think they are too much concentrated. They want to keep Mr. Kurz. They are defending him, which is a nonsense because there happen a lot of things. He himself, in this way of defending, did not too much, but he tolerated that the people around him did something. That's a real problem. So far, I think the opposition is always going, which crimes were done. He did some minor things, for sure, which will lead to court and so on and so on. But the nasty things were done by others, using the confidence Mr. Kurz had in them. That's a real problem. I think as a former politician, I may say you have to look whom you are asking to work with you. Here you have to be extremely critical and so on and so on. And this he missed. That has a follow-up for discussion because all the government members and everyone was standing up. I think he has to stay, and without him we will lose, and so on and so on. I think the real future of the party is if they are making a cut. I wrote an article this afternoon for a newspaper. I think that he should leave, and they shall convince him to leave because this is opening the future of the party. I think, yeah, but we have nobody. I think that's one of the most silly sentences existing in politics. I think for a successorship, there's always somebody existing. I think you might not know him by the day, but it is for sure developing. I think there is no situation. We have nobody. But this is another question. I don't want to elaborate on this. What about the cultural differentiations for the future of the European Union? I think that's a positive side. The cultural differentiations were existing from the beginning. I think the differences between Germany and France existing, the difference between Italy and other parts are existing, and. I think the real problem we have nowadays by immigration is first of all the immigration of Muslims. I think that's not yet managed. What's the reason? I think the knowledge of the majority of the Europeans about what means Islam and what is a Muslim is not really existing. Because it is also a cultural differentiation which is visible. I think for wearing the scarf and so on and so on, that's a primitive part of the story. That's not a real differentiation. I think you can explain it if you want to understand it. But here you have the different routes for sure existing. The differentiation in general is not so big, as it is always told. It becomes more difficult if from outside it is influenced to be more created. That's my criticism on my beloved Ottoman Empire. No, it's now the name is Turkey, because they are investing a lot of money, I think, to create more differentiation, influencing the guest workers out of Turkey existing in the different countries. I think I'm in a close relation with the Muslim community in my country. There's really no problem. I think it's coming from outside. Plus, different foreign workers coming from outside. The integration of Afghans and all those who are coming out of the Caucasus area is a problem. Here, this cultural distance is a little bit big. If you explain it and you try to elaborate on this, that's for sure possible, but that's not yet done. I think the majority is working on the other side to show up the differences. And I think the Austrian newspapers, if something is happening, I think those who did it, we don't know, but it is for sure a Muslim. And if it's not a Muslim afterwards, nobody is really writing it. I think that's one of the difficulties existing. But here I'm in a certain way optimistic because things are also moving forward, hopefully quick enough. We will get problems because Europe is shrinking by population, and we are by labor force very much depending outside, starting from Romania, Bulgaria.
We're inside.
You are inside, but in the beginning it was a problem here.
Wow.
And now we are learning. I think that's the very good story of the English situation, that they are now learning that they are depending on other Europeans, which I think is a difficulty for English, because I think coming from an island, there's a feeling that they are really separated, and as I said, Great Britannia rules the waves, and also the rest of Europe, which is for a long time not anymore existing. Enough?
I don't know. Let's say get another round of questions, and then we can start with Max here. He had a,
Yeah, the background.
and then Manuel and
Hello, I'm Max. I'm from Vienna also. So my question is also about the general politics in Austria and how this will influence the Austrian image internationally, especially in regards to the European Union. We've had in the last 4 years now 2 elections. Now their government is not really stable again. So does Europe maybe have larger problems, and so this whole thing won't really affect Austrian image that much, or are we a lost cause?
is Austria a lost cause? That's the question here. No, that's not gonna happen. No. Another go back. There was someone there.
Last row.
Yes, Manuel.
Hello, my name is Manuel. Given Europe's slowly receding power because of shrinking, what do you think should be or could be the European Union's role in international affairs moving forward?
Yes.
Hi, I was wondering what you think the path forward is for Western Balkan secession, and especially in overcoming the anti-enlargement opinions of a lot of EU leadership.
The way forward for the Western Balkans,
Western
given
Balkans.
the anti-enlargement opinion.
Okay.
There was another question somewhere. That's last chance before Connor asks his question again. I can see him. Okay, Connor.
Hi. What would you recommend the EU do to be a more effective decision-making body on union policy and external policy, or should it be a more effective decision maker?
Okay.
First question, what is the impression outside Austria and so on by the things which are now happening? First of all, I think if there's some fear that we are getting some difficulties by this, I think not too much or not too many are looking in Austria and the rest of Europe. I think we are not a hidden country, but mainly I think we are concerning skiing or some things, or Salzburg Festival and so on, pretty well known. For the rest, I think I have no fear. Those who are constantly looking to Austria, which, for example, the German newspapers are doing, they are, I think it makes no discussion what we are really doing. I think we are a little bit in the corner of being a hilarious country. I think with strange things and happenings and so on. Okay. I think I may say it's a little cynical. As long as they are coming as tourists, the world is okay. I think it is a hilarious country, but they want to visit it. And how they are looking, these Austrians living in the mountains, or wherever we are living out of the feeling of the Germans. That's quite okay. I think we have a certain revenge. I think what we are thinking about the Germans is also not of the sometimes very fair side, because I think we are looking back to history, the Prussians, and so on, in a certain way. And really, if you ask an Austrian, do Germany have a culture, that we are saying no. I think it's always bought from Austria. I think it's wrong. Sometimes it's true, but we have a long discussion and so on. That's a result of history. Don't underestimate this. I think what has happened in the 19th century had a deep impact by German unification, and by the downgoing of the Austro-Hungarian monarchy. I think these were two different processes. The one up, being economically stronger, military, and so on and so on. And the Austrians, I think, we did like the life and the convenient, and we want to stay in the coffee shop and so on and so on, which all the specific narratives are for sure existing for my beloved country. I think it's not only a mistake. I want to do an intervention because I mentioned army and so on and so on. I think what should be a discussion within the European Union, I'm changing the subject totally, is what we are doing with the role of Europe in the world. And I think as long as we have membership to NATO, but not really armies which are worthwhile be seen as an army, I think it's not that enough. The only Germans had something on this subject, but I think it is also going down. I think there are constant reports that all the weapons are rusty and so on, which I think is also difficulty. It is a real question, I think, who has an army in the world and who is defending what for sure. I think we learned for a very long time to depend on the Americans. It was really done. And we Austrians had a specific role because we explained we are neutral. So far, we are out of everything. We can look to the others and being friendly, greeting them all, and nobody will do us any harm. I think I was already involved in politics as we got the feelings that somebody might do some harm. I will tell the story. I think as the Warsaw Pact countries intervened in Prague in 1968 with army and so on and so on. And here the Austrian government, and I was assisting here at the sessions of the government, had the feeling, and we got some informations. I think the Soviet army or the Warsaw Pact armies might decide to go through Austria to Yugoslavia because there was a so-called Brezhnev doctrine. There's only one socialism in socialist countries. And that was a reason why they intervened in Czechoslovakia. And that might have been the reason why they are intervening in Yugoslavia. There was sometimes in Moscow the discussion, I think, shall we clean up this specific form of Yugoslav communism? It was a kind of communism, but on a low level, and especially in the northern parts of Yugoslavia, extremely friendly and with a specific kind of specific Yugoslav capitalism were here existing. So the Austrian government was shocked, we have to do something. Then we sent the foreign minister, it was Mr. Waldheim at this time, to Washington. He has to raise the question, if something is happening, are the Americans us defending? He did it. And he heard and said, the answer was quite clear. The Americans told me, you are a neutral country. I think you have no problems. You are defending yourself. Huh? So far, the Austrian government in this time got neutrality is not the only thing which helps us. To keep out of everything, okay. But if you are in something, there's no situation where you are defended by somebody. And that's a real question for whole Europe. I think for the moment, we are not able to defend ourselves. And this I have also to add, because I missed it in the former statements. We are full of local conflicts, which can become immediately a bigger war. We have these conflicts, Ukraine, Donetsk, Russia. We have Belarus conflict internally. Nobody knows what's going on. We have a lot of conflicts, not yet with weapons, but for sure existing between different countries, for sure in the Balkans. We have the conflicts in the Caucasus, Azerbaijan, Armenia, and so on, so on. Europe, We have the conflicts in Syria with the influence of migration, which I think migration is also a kind of a war if you are doing it critically. My beloved friend Erdogan is always telling us, if I want to do Europe a harm, I will send you the refugees. He has, I think, around 4 million or something like that. That's an army. I think we have no army, I think, to fight against this. And I think that is of extreme importance. We have no discussion about this. We have only the pressure of the United States concerning this 2% of the GDP invested for defense and so on and so on. That's the only one. And if you're looking to the different justifications of the EU member states, which are NATO members, I think how they are collecting this 2% is a real strange story, because they are lying to themselves. It is not 2%. I think it's on low level. We have a long time of peace after 1945, but I cannot guarantee you that there will be always peace. From my feeling, it's going more in direction of some wars, because the production of weapons, the weapons industry is really blossoming. And I think there's a certain character of weapons. If you are collecting weapons and it is more and more and more, somebody will come and will use it. That's a warning from your generation. I'm happy enough to be old. Hopefully it's not happening in my lifetime. For you, you are more endangered. Peace is more a challenge than it has been for a very long time. And it is not discussed. And it is not discussed. I'm looking always to the think tanks, and they are writing a lot and also about peace and so on, and analyzing also about military power. I think concerning peace, we need a do tank looking for peace, which I think is more extremely important. We have enough think tanks. Do tanks are more important, but this is another remark. Western Balkans. I think we had a meeting of the European Union with the Western Balkans recently in Slovenia, because Slovenia is the chair to the European Union. There's no change. I was part of the meeting of the Council of Europe in Thessaloniki 2003, where it was decided that all the countries of the Balkans will become members of the European Union. It happened only concerning Croatia. Here, the Germans were pressing for, they say, this was a key role of the Germans. My country was not enough pressing. We are really convinced that it should be, but I think we didn't do too much. We are not so powerful. That's always our argument for ourselves. We are not powerful, so the others have to do it, which is wrong. We have also to do it here. I think the Western Balkans are extremely important. Why? Because it is an angle of the continent of Europe which is extremely weak. We are a neighborhood to critical situations. If you are looking to Turkey and the Marmara Sea, if you are looking to the Black Sea, we are looking to the critical situation, the Russian behavior concerning Baltic states, Poland, and so on and so on. We have the difficulties that the Mediterranean area is also dangerous and nobody knows in which direction goes, and nobody is aware of this. This is true for the whole European Union. There is not too much engagement concerning the Balkans. Here I'm defending Angela Merkel. She's the only one who did something. It was a Berlin process. But may I say, as a part of the Berlin process for years and years, it was in the last years not very successful. I think the outcome of the meetings were at minimum. So I have a last question, which I cannot read. EU meetings.
What would you change in the mechanisms of the EU to make it?
Yeah, true. That's clear. I think in criticism, I'm not looking to the Commission and not looking to the Parliament. I'm looking to the member states. And we need a straight process, giving more responsibility to the European Union and reducing the responsibility of the member states. Otherwise, no Europe will really exist. That has to be said quite straight. There should be a clear program. First statement, second negative statement. This for the moment is nobody discussing. I think there's nothing happening on this. So far, I think until now, a majority, the Europe together was a success story. And at the same time, it is not a success story, but why it is not really happening and not moving forward, which is for sure a pity. I'm a convinced European. But I think register in the media or elsewhere an outcry concerning this. I think in Austria we had only a writer, Mr. Robert Menasse, who did an outcry concerning this as a noble, typical for Austria. I think he's not making a political statement, he's writing a novel, because literature is well accepted in Austria. No? So I think he wrote a very nice novel. The political content was not really seen. That's the criticism of my beloved country. Thank you very much.
So thanks a lot. I'm more than happy to leave it here at give more power to the European Union and less power to the nation states. And thank you also for all your contribution to making that happen. If we're closer to that ideal, it's also because of you. So thanks a lot. And see you all around. Have a good evening.